Hey, okay. All right, well, it looks like we've got a couple of folks jumping in. We're just gonna leave this open for a little bit until we get a little bit more participants and we get everything worked out over here on Facebook. And wait till actual 11 o'clock. For those of you who are just jumping on, I'll say this again once we actually start. But if you have any questions or comments that you want Dr. Liz or I to respond to, please make sure that you send those over through the Facebook Live so I can see them. Or if you're in Zoom, go ahead, you can utilize that Zoom chat. I'll be checking both of those so we can answer questions along the way. Yay, okay, it's working. Close. So we can answer questions along the way. Yay, Howard's even like, he's saying good morning to us. All right. Move this part up. Aaron, I'm gonna try and hide you. Don't want to stop your video. Okay, look, I need you to. Okay, everybody. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So today, for those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Neely Walker, and today our guest is Dr. Liz Gagnet. We're gonna talk a little bit about living with PSSM, which is polysaccharide storage myopathy in horses. I want to start by saying that Dr. Liz or I, we do not profess to be experts in this field by any means, but Dr. Liz has some unique experience in managing one of her own performance horses that does have PSSM. So I thought it would be really interesting to kind of discuss how she manages that horse and some of the things that aren't really necessarily published information that you can't really look up online. But that she's kind of learned through her trials and tribulations and trying to keep this horse active and useful. First, we're going to start out with, I'm going to share y'all my screen. I've got a little bit of a PowerPoint that I would like to show you, just kind of going over some of the basics of what PSSM is and why it's a little bit of an issue, okay? So PSSM is polysaccharide storage myopathy, right? It's a dominant autosomal hereditary condition. So it's a genetically inherited disease. You only have to have one copy of the disease from a parent, or one copy of the gene from a parent to actually be susceptible to the gene. These horses end up having abnormal amounts of glycogen stored in their muscle. They actually have 2 times more glycogen or sugar stores in their muscles compared to normal horses. And what does this cause? This causes a non-exertional or an exertional rhabdomyolysis, and it's basically tying up. For those of you who've heard Monday morning disease or azoturia, same kind of symptoms apply. They get really rigid muscles, as you can see in this horse right here. Really, they're super reluctant to walk, to move, to do anything. And the reason with this PSSM is actually causing changes to the metabolism of sugar within their muscles and the actual muscle structure itself. Without getting into a whole lot of detail, there's a lot of really detailed information about how the cells store the sugar and why the muscle cells utilize it differently. But again, since I'm not an expert, I'm not even going to try to explain that part yet. I'm going to show you a really great resource about that later if you guys are interested in going into that much detail.
Real quick, Neely, go back. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just going to point out that it is dominant, and so that's really important. So your next slide obviously covers that. I just saw it. Yeah. So that's sorry. That's really important to remember in this disease, is that it is a dominant hereditary. So one copy from one parent, it's likely to pass to the babies.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's dominant inheritance, right? So only one copy of this gene is required. And that means if you have a mare, so let's just look at this Punnett square really fast. If you have a sire and a dam, neither of them have a copy, all of your babies will be free of this potential disease, right? If you have a stallion that's free, but a mare that has one copy, that baby's going to carry a copy, right? And if you have a daddy that has a copy and a mama that has a copy, then they're going to carry both copies. So basically 75% of the horses in this little Punnett square have the opportunity to get this disease. It's not like some of the other genetic disorders that we look at and are concerned at with the quarter horse industry, that you have to have two copies of it to actually see the disease. Again, with it being dominant, you only have to have one copy. So, and where does this come from? Right now, the prevalence in the quarter horse industry, there's 6 to 8% of all quarter horses are affected by PSSM, which is a little concerning, right? Where do we think this comes from? Way back in the day, researchers have found big links to draft horses. So 74% from the Belgium Tricard, North American Belgium horse, 39% affected, North American Percheron is 62% affected. And like Liz was saying in a little bit of a conversation earlier, why did we even continue breeding this if it came from Belgians, you know, and it kind of influenced our quarter horses later down the line as we bred them? This was a positive thing for these Belgian horses because they're pulling big heavy draft horses are pulling. And these horses that had PSSM didn't require as much food to maintain body weight and to be able to maintain that heavy workload.
And
so,
also the management of these horses. So in the old days, horses were worked 6 to 7 days a week. And so they weren't in stalls. And when they were heavy load worked every day. And so one thing that we'll get into later is that with PSSM, when you exercise these horses every single day, they do okay. But you can't put them in a stall and expect them to be okay and not get exercise. So it wasn't as big of a deal when horses were managed differently than how we manage them today.
Okay, let's see if I can get. So how do we manage these horses now? Just basics. I'm just going to cover a little bit of the basics, and then I'm going to let Dr. Liz kind of go into how she does it specifically. But basic management is because these horses have excess starch or sugar in their muscle cells already, you have to decrease the amount of starches that are in their diets, right? Because you want to decrease the insulin stimulation that happens in their digestive system and in their bodies naturally. You want to increase their exercise. You got to burn off all that glycogen, right? And you want to utilize fat as your primary fuel source, which can be difficult in horses. Dietary changes alone are not enough. That's the big take-home message with this, is you have to increase their exercise. They have to be worked on a daily basis. They have to have access to turnout. They cannot be stalled and be managed efficiently. Some of the other big things, your vitamins and your minerals are going to be really important. And Liz can talk more about this, but she was instructed by a nutritional consultant to keep potassium at less than 33 grams per meal. Magnesium is also going to be really important. And then vitamin E supplementation is also really important. When you start utilizing fat as a dietary resource, it can increase free radicals. So you use vitamin E to kind of negate some of that free radical formation. And you want to use that at 1,000 to 2,000 international units per 1,000 pounds of horse that you have.
So,
go back to that one if you need it.
Yeah. The reason that keeping potassium low is important in these guys is because with the abnormal muscles, the PSSM1 horses are more sensitive to potassium than a lot of other horses. Every horse is different. That's one thing to keep in mind with these management of these PSSM horses, is no horse is exactly the same. It has to do with what genes they have and what genes are expressed. And so there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that we can't predict at this point. We don't have good tests to know exactly what these horses, what other genes they have in addition to the PSSM. And so I keep saying PSSM1, there is a second type of PSSM where basically all the other muscle myopathies, besides some of the major ones, there's a different class, and those are different. Management is different. So we're focusing here on the PSSM1 horses. But basically these horses, how you manage them is going to depend on that particular horse. Once you find the kind of key to that horse, then you can manage them well. Some horses are harder to manage than others because of extenuating things. And so, like I said, you can't just say, well, I give my horse this and that's going to work for every horse. And that's just not the case. My horse had a particular problem with potassium. And so that's why they recommended that lower potassium diet. Not every horse has that much problems with potassium. Some horses are definitely more sensitive than others. And we'll get into where that potassium can be found and that kind of thing in a little bit.
So I just wanted to show, this was pulled from one of the resources that Dr. Valberg at MSU has published with e-extension. And they had a really good guide kind of as a baseline on how you would manage normal condition horses, how you would manage performance horses, and how you would manage those over-conditioned horses. So a normal condition maintenance style horse, right? That's not fat. Unfortunately, some of these PSSM horses can be over-conditioned or be your easy keepers. So you just have to be mindful. We're gonna talk about the normal body condition horse, not excessively overweight. You want to keep them with non-structural, like less than 12% non-structural carbohydrate hay, so normal grass hay, at 1.5% of their body weight per day. Okay, you can add fat supplementation, and they recommended 240 milliliters of oil, or over like some type of cubed forage, or utilizing rice bran as that fat supplementation. And again, to be really mindful about your mineral and vitamin balancer. With performance horses is where you really need to get into heavy fat supplementation. Again, they're going to have the normal less than 12% non-structural carbohydrate grass hay. You're also going to have a higher fat supplementation in these horses. So 13% of their daily intake of calories can be from fat, which is much different than the way we're going to utilize an over-conditioned horse or even a normal conditioned horse that's not working heavily. But these are performance animals, right? So heavy work, not just the average trail rider. And again, we're going to go back to that mineral, be able to balance that mineral and vitamin as well. Now, when we talk about, it's really important when we talk about horses that are over-conditioned when you're trying to manage them. If they're not already in kind of an extreme or high intensity exercise plan, they kind of need to get on one. And what you're trying to do with these horses that are over-conditioned is you want to burn up that excess glycogen that's already in the muscle cells and get them back to a normal body condition so you can kind of supplement that fat more effectively and not get them even more over-conditioned, which can exacerbate some of the secondary conditions that can come along with managing this.
I kind of think of these horses as like needing a keto diet or the Atkins diet or any of those, high fat, low carb diets. That's kind of, if you think about it that way, it's a little bit easier to kind of process what we're talking about here. So the less than 12% non-structural carbohydrates, if you're not testing your grass hay, sometimes that little bit of difference can make a difference. Some horses are much more sensitive and need way less than 12%. In those horses, a lot of times you have to soak their hay. And so you'll soak it in water and then throw that water away. I've heard, some people get confused and they're like, well, I soak the hay, but then they give the horse the soaked water. Well, then they're just sucking down those sugars that you got out of the hay. So if you're going to soak the hay, you're going to soak it in water for about 30 minutes to an hour before you feed it. And then rinse it really good and then give the horse that soaked hay. And that's going to pull out some of those extra sugars for those extra sensitive horses. Some horses can handle a little bit higher non-structural carbohydrates. So some horses, if your grass hay is 15%, and that's part of their diet, some horses are okay. A lot of it's going to depend on how much exercise they're getting, what else you're feeding them, and their specific needs and ability to process those sugars.
So this is where Dr. Liz's experience is really going to come into play, right? These horses all have unique triggers. You got to trigger them like the individual, but some of the things that are going to trigger them are any type of high stress environment, right? And for some of them, it could be their diet. It could be related to weather. And what they're saying is cold, humid, like wet, soggy environments, or anything where you're jumping from one extreme to the other as far as weather goes. Usually these horses get extra stressed out about that. If they have the wrong type of exercise, if they have any type of injury or hoof pain, trailering, farrier work, body work as in chiropractic work or acupuncture, bathing them with super cold water, or even if they have some type of veterinary work done, such as vaccinations or deworming or anything that may be overtly stressful to them. So why don't you tell us about some of the things that surprised you as you're starting to manage your mare?
So one thing to think about with these triggers is if you think about, like, if you went out and you ran 5 miles today and you haven't run in 10 years, okay, your muscles are going to be super tight. You have a lot of lactic acid buildup in there, and they're going to be really painful, right? So when you touch them, they're hard, they hurt. That's kind of what these PSSM horses after a tie-up feel, is those muscles are super duper hard. So when you run your hand over them, it's like hitting a brick wall. And that's why they don't like that cold. They really hate to be bathed with cold water. They hate to be cold. So my mare is blanketed. If it is less than 50 degrees, she has a blanket on of some form or fashion. Sometimes if it's a really damp cold, if it's less than 60, I'll put a blanket on her. It may not be a heavy blanket, but she's got 3 different blankets. She's got a sheet, she's got a medium blanket, and she's got a heavy blanket. And we watch the weather, and it's kind of ridiculous how much, sometimes it's like you put on the blanket and you're like, well, I know you're a little bit hot right now, but I promise you're going to want this in a couple hours. So South Louisiana weather it's difficult, but it's also a little bit easier because, if you go up into Wyoming, Montana, where it's super cold all the time, these horses tend to get really cold. They don't like to be cold. So you're blanketing more. If you have a lot of snow, then it's harder to get your exercise done unless you have an inside arena, something like that. So exercise-wise, if you're taking these horses and they haven't been exercised, so the worst thing for a PSSM horse is to pull it up out of the pasture and go work it, whatever that entails. If that's a trail ride, if that's, they've had 2 weeks off and you want to go to a show and you haven't been riding or whatever, that is a big trigger for a lot of these PSSM horses. You really have to build them up over a couple of weeks. So if I give my mare any time off whatsoever, I start with lunging for about 5 minutes, and sometimes she can't handle that depending on what the grasses are like, and how long she's been off and exercising, that kind of thing. So I'm talking walking for about 5 minutes, and that's all she'll get that day. Then the next day I'll do 5 minutes of walking and maybe 10 or 15 seconds of trotting, and then walk again. And then the next day we'll go up to maybe 30 seconds of trotting, and over weeks I can build her back up and get her back into a condition. And when you look at her, it's not like she's thin, it's not like she's having, you don't notice anything. But when you start lunging these horses, start working them, you'll notice they trip more. That's because their muscles are tight and they just physically can't pick their feet up. They look stiffer in their gaits. Sometimes they're super duper grumpy. A lot of these horses don't like to be groomed. So when you brush them, they get really, they'll pin their ears at you. They might try to bite you. The right side of her neck is a trigger for her. She doesn't like to be brushed on that side. So I just kind of, do the minimal that I can there. That's a big thing. Trailering can be a big trigger. If you think about horses in a trailer, they're having to adjust their body weight the entire time. And so that can be a trigger for some of these. With her, thankfully it's not. I did show her a lot. She's been hauled. She's relatively laid back. So that doesn't bother her. But there's a lot of horses that if they're super duper buddy sour, they may tie up just from if you take their buddy away or if you haul them somewhere and they get stressed. So all of those things can be triggers. Vaccines can be a trigger in these horses. So I actually split her vaccines out, and I usually try to pre-med with Banamine. Last year, she did have a mild case of colic about after I vaccinated her. So it just kind of depends on the horse. It depends what you're doing with them as far as what their particular triggers are. For her, I maintain her on grass hay. She gets beet pulp and 1 pound of enrich, and she gets corn oil because it's the lowest potassium fat. And then she gets a grazing muzzle anytime she goes out. So she spends probably 15 to 20 hours a day out in a pasture, but she has a grazing muzzle on if she goes out for any period of time. that's really important for her because especially in the spring with these grasses, the green grasses coming in, the sugars and stuff, she did tie up last spring, even though I was riding her pretty heavily with the spring grasses. And that's when I started using the grazing muzzle. Since I've added that into our protocol, she has not tied up, knock on wood. So that's what I have to say about that.
So we're going to go, I'm going to go through just a few more slides and then I'm going to ask you a couple of pointed questions here. But there are more than just one form of a muscle myopathy, okay? And the ones that we're going to talk about right here are the ones that are genetically linked, okay? So there are malignant hypothermia, hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, glycogen branching, enzyme deficiency, and immune-mediated
myositis.
I already was going to get that wrong. All of these are actually fairly prevalent in the quarter horse industry right now, which is kind of concerning. If you look at some of these, so malignant hypothermia actually can exacerbate some of the issues with PSSM1. So you got to be really careful about these horses. Okay, and malignant hypothermia causes high temperature, increased heart rate, sweating, acidosis, muscle rigidity, and it could be fatal. You usually don't see malignant hypothermia in horses until you put them under for some type of anesthesia, okay? These horses can't regulate their body temperatures and they usually end up dying because there's not a whole lot of treatment options for these horses, okay? HYPP, this is an older genetic disease that most of us are fairly familiar with, right? It causes muscle contractions because there's a problem with their sodium potassium pump. That's why those horses get that big Arnold Schwarzenegger look to them. The big thing is it causes seizures, temporary paralysis, and can be fatal. Now, if you start looking at some of these, this is affecting 1.5% of the quarter horse population. It's mainly seen in halter type horses, right? Not a lot of riding horses have HYPP as a problem. Now, GBED is, it causes muscle weakness, but most of the biggest problem that they're going to see is abortion or stillborn in foals because they have the inability to store sugar properly. Now, you're starting to see this at 8 to 10% of quarter horses. Right? This IMM is causing rapid and severe symmetrical wasting of the top line muscles, which is caused by an inflammatory destruction of the fast twitch muscles. And 6.8 of quarter horses as a whole population, but 24% of that are reiners specifically, and 17% of them are coming from the working cow horse side of the industry. And the more we go through this, the more you start to see you start to think, like, where's the common thread here? Why is this so prevalent in quarter horses, and why is it becoming more and more prevalent in, you know, that performance side of the quarter horse industry, and specifically the working cow type side of the industry, not the racing side of the industry. And it's honestly because we have done a really good job or a really poor job at inbreeding without testing our animals. Right now, specifically in the cutting horse industry, over 30% of all of our horses are inbred in some way, shape, or form, which as you continue to do these things and inbreed, you get a lot of really great attributes in your animals, but you also open the window for a lot of deleterious alleles to come in, which can cause these muscle wasting issues and these other sugar storing issues as well. So I guess my point in saying all this is we really need to be responsible when we're talking about breeding these animals and continuing the future of our quarter horse industry and our performance horse industry. It's really important to test these animals and to know what you're doing. Since it is heritable, it's really important to know just what you're going to be getting or what the potential that you're going to have. Because at some point, if we don't become more mindful about the crosses we're making with the horses, it's going to be absolutely impossible for us to make a choice to breed an animal that's not carrying some form of a genetic disease, okay? And that's all I have for that. Now, what I'm going to ask Dr. Liz is, I know there's a lot of things that you've learned along the way in managing your mare that kind of blew my mind, right? Like, you're doing all these things at home to manage this horse. What did you find that was a little that you had to be extra careful of when you were going to shows or when you were hauling or?
So she is super sensitive to potassium. Alfalfa has a lot of potassium in it. So she is absolutely, she does not get any potassium. That is not in her diet. So one of the things that you have to be really careful with is when you go to shows, a lot of people will hang their hay bags on like a adjoining stall door, a wall. And you know, it's usually not a big deal. The other horse eats a little bit of the hay, no big deal, whatever. With her, I have to be really careful who I stall next to. And if I do stall next to somebody I don't know, I always make sure that they don't hang an alfalfa hay bag next to her stall. Because that's like giving candy to a diabetic. Like she cannot handle it. And so I didn't want, you know, I was always super careful about that. There was one show I went to where the horse next to us, they had like a big bag of sweet feed that they fed their horse, and they had it in the barn aisle. Well, it made me really nervous because if something happens, if she somehow got out of her stall or, you know, some just any possible scenario where she got into that bag of food, it could kill her. And so I did ask them to move the food further down away from her stall. You know, the chances of her getting into it were pretty slim, but it was something that it was a concern for me. So it's things that you have to think about that you don't even realize. So because potassium is an issue for her, I can't give her electrolytes, like normal horse electrolytes, because all of them have potassium. I'm a big fan of the platinum products. They have potassium added, so she can't have that. So it's things that you have to think about. So she gets white salt in her food, no potassium added. When I give her salt blocks, I give her the white salt blocks. So I don't give her the red ones because they have potassium added. I don't know about the Himalayan salts and stuff. And so for me, I just stay away from it. If I don't know, I stay away. When you're going somewhere, you know, you can't let her drop her head and grab a bite to eat because what if that grass has too much sugar? So I'm just super careful about all of those things. Like we were at someone else's house a while back with a different horse, and there was a bite of alfalfa on the ground, and my husband was holding my horse for me. It was a different horse. And he was like, she really wants that. And I was like, well, she can have it. It's not a big deal. It's on the ground. It's fair game. And he's like, I'm just so in the mode of like, absolutely not. You know, so it's things like that that you have to be aware of. Like you want to do what's best for your horse. And so you have to look at all of the scenarios, and the tighter you can keep their management in these horses, the better they do. It's really important that we, you know, if you have a PSSM horse, that you are aware of all of the variables. Like I buy the exact same brand of food. I don't deviate on that. I don't, like they had the beet pulp shreds at the store the other day instead of the beet pulp pellets. I won't buy them because there's a chance that she won't eat that, you know, like, or it may be a little bit different, or the poundage that I'm used to feeding her is going to be off. And so everything has to be exactly the same. These horses love routine. They're really routine oriented. Like they know what time they get fed. I'm not a big, you know, there are people who are like, I feed at 6 and 6 every day. That's not me. But she likes her routine. Like she knows what time it's time to eat, and she pees at the same time every day. And like, she likes her routine. Like that's all I mean, that's the big thing, is just keep them in their routine, keep their diet very, very consistent as you can, even with the hay. So my hay supplier is pretty good, but we will get large loads of hay at a time so that that lot is kind of consistent. And then whenever I have to refill the hay, I kind of am a little bit careful with transitioning her. She has not had a problem with that, so it hasn't been a big deal, but there are some horses who do have a problem with that. So by adding the grazing muzzle and taking away some of the grass sugars, I've been able to get away with maybe a little bit higher grass hay sugars. I don't have to soak her hay or anything like that, which is nice. She just gets her beet pulp and her enrich every day.
So Jenna asked if there was a daily recommendation limit to potassium intakes. So for example, is a per meal meaningful? So is potassium concentration intake in a short period of time worse than long-term or overall?
It definitely depends on the horse. So the nutritionist that I talked to was at Purina, and at the time we were still very early in the diagnosis period. And so she had some episodes that looked very similar to HYPP. And so her HYPP test was negative, and we just weren't sure if she was having some, unknown genetic, because HYPP is testing the gene from the impressive bred line, and that's it. So if they don't have any impressive bred line, they will be negative for HYPP, but they could still have a potassium problem, which she does. So at that time, we were trying to be really, really mindful of keeping her potassium low. And so the potassium per meal is kind of based on those HYPP horses, which I will be honest, I'm not as familiar with. I know that you don't want to give them a ton because they just have a problem processing it and keeping it where it's supposed to stay in the cells. So I don't know for sure the answer to that question, but for her, it hasn't been, once I got her diet regulated, her potassium has not been a problem. When she was first diagnosed, she had a couple of episodes where she collapsed. And she couldn't get up, and her potassium at that time was at a level that the surgeon at LSU said he had never seen in a live horse. So, it really scared me. I thought she was going to die, but she's not had those episodes since I fixed her diet. At that point, I had her on sweet feed. Molasses has a ton of potassium in it, so it's something to think about. I had her on alfalfa hay. She was a show horse that I had just bought, and so I was just trying to, I managed her the way that I managed my previous show horses, which had not had problems. So I wasn't mindful of the fact that she was getting all this stuff because I didn't know at that time that she had PSSM. Once we made the diagnosis and I adjusted her diet and her exercise, she has been well controlled.
Sorry, I keep muting it. My dogs are trying to bark in the background. So I guess here's a big question too. Is there life after diagnosis, right? Like once you find out that your horse has PSSM, do we need to get rid of it? Is this a pasture ornament for life, or is there actual long-term management strategies that you can use to actually have a performance animal and have a long career in the performance world?
For her, she's had a good career. I've had her for 2 years now. We diagnosed her in June of 2018. So I've managed her for 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. We successfully showed in our CHA, we show in Lash. She's a show horse. That is what she does. And as long as I manage her well, she's not had a problem. That being said, I know of other people who, there's our pasture horses. They can't manage them. They, like I talked about earlier with the different genes that may be causing different issues. Some horses aren't able to be managed, or you can't find the right protocol for them. So it really depends on the horse. I think, the horses, she only has one PSSM gene. Those horses are traditionally easier to manage. When they have 2 copies of the gene, those horses do tend to be much harder to manage. And then when you get into the PSSM2 with the other different muscle diseases, when you add in all those, if they have some of those, they can be harder to manage. And so just, I do, there's a couple of Facebook groups. If you search PSSM, there's some really good groups out there, forums and stuff, that have a lot of anecdotal information. So a lot of people who have these horses, who are feeding these horses and treating these horses and riding these horses, and they all are super duper helpful. I ask questions, I answer other people's questions. There's just a lot of really good information out there. There's another girl I know that has a show jumper, and she is showing that horse, and he's got PSSM1. He was diagnosed, I think, 1 year or 2 ago. And since they fixed his diet, he's back to, is a pony, and he's back to show jumping and stuff. So they have the potential to have a good life after diagnosis if you manage them well and if they can be managed.
I guess that's an important point to say too, and to bring up. In some of our research through this, we've realized that there are a lot of other genetic factors that can play into this, right? So just because your horse has 1 copy of PSSM doesn't mean that it may not also have recurrent exertional rhabdomyolysis. So that can completely exacerbate the situation that you're having with PSSM1. You could be managing it effectively for PSSM1, but then the RER is coming back to rear its ugly head and affecting you in another way where you're not able to manage that horse effectively. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting in going through some of the publications was that there are a certain subsect of horses that are currently being bred by some of these larger farms or even smaller farms, that the way that they manage their horses, they're not actually testing each individual mare But the way that they manage their horses, they don't see PSSM1. They don't see any PSSM issues in their horses because of the way that they're managed, especially if they're out west and they're kind of in a dry lot type pasture situation where they're eating off of big round bales. They're having lots of turnout, lots of exercise. They may be breeding and unknowingly adding carriers into the gene pool. So I guess my point in this is to prevent any further issues. Be mindful when you're purchasing something or when you're selecting a stallion to breed to, or like when Liz went to go buy this mare that she has now, if that mare would have been tested, she wouldn't have had to learn the hard way how to manage this horse and almost watch that mare die unnecessarily because she would have known how to manage it in the beginning.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer that if you're breeding horses, you should be testing. AQHA has the 5-panel test. You pluck the hair. They do the DNA testing on it. And so if the mare and stallion had been tested and I had had those results, I probably would have made a different decision. My mare came from Texas, Oklahoma border area. So, you look at their environment, it's much, much different than ours. There's not the green grass that we get. She was kept, more in a dry lot type situation. She's from a big farm out there. She's a really well-bred mare. I mean, I looked at her papers and I was shocked that I could get something in my budget with that kind of papers. And so, lessons learned. AQHA has, for members, you can log in their membership section and you can pull any, if you have their registered name, you can pull any horses papers that have, and that if they've been 5-panel tested, that will be on those papers. It is public information. So the stallion owners have to test. That's the AQHA rules. So if you are standing a stallion for AQHA, they have to be 5-panel tested now. That's a new thing. When my mare was bred, that was not required. So she got it from her dad. The mares do not have to be tested per AQHA. I would highly recommend anyone who's breeding to test all of their horses. It's $85 or $100 per test. It's very reasonable. It's very easy to do. You need 10 or 15 hair with the hair follicles on them. You send it off to UC Davis. They send back the results. No big deal. It took a couple of weeks. I think that, sometimes they get backed up. It takes a little bit longer. But if you're going to breed your mare, I think it's important to have that information to know, is your horse a herded carrier? We're not talking about herded today, but herded, if they can be a carrier. And if you breed that carrier to another carrier, you could have major problems. So it's important to know what these horses' genetic issues are. And then you can make informed breeding decisions. I would never, ever, ever breed a PSSM horse. The chances of getting another PSSM horse are just far too great because it's a dominant trait. It's going to be 50% even if you breed them to a negative horse. So if I bred this mare to a negative stallion, I still have a 50% chance of getting a positive foal. That's a 50% chance every time you breed. So every foal has a 50% chance of having this debilitating disease. It's just not worth it. And it's something that if we all are really cognizant about and do the right thing, we could potentially get this out of our breeding pool. But there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, she's well managed on diet and exercise, so what's the big deal? The next one might be well managed. Well, the next one might, or the next one might die at 3 from a tie-up episode. What happens with these horses that tie up, their muscles tighten up, it releases a lot of really bad things, and then the kidneys have to filter out those bad things. There are horses that will die from kidney failure after a tie-up. I can't remember, Sarah Rose, I think was her name. She's a barrel racer. She had a really pretty Bay Roan mare that she showed at the NFR. She may have won the NFR or something. She was very well known. It was a very, very nice horse. She tied up and died from kidney failure from PSSM. So these horses can be successful if you manage them well, but if they have an episode, it can be devastating for the horse. So that's my soapbox. I'll step off of it.
It's important to know, though. Stacy asked if there's any experience or comments on using Alcar instead of fat. Her horse is extremely easy keeper and could not feed additional fat, but she has seen a good response on Alcar.
I have seen that in some of the forums. When I got my mare, she was thin. I wanted to put weight on her, hence the alfalfa and the sweet feed and stuff. I was actively trying to put weight on her. Since I've balanced her diet, she's become more of an easy keeper. She's still not a super duper easy keeper. Like she's not one that if I'm riding her heavy, I ride pretty consistently. So when I'm exercising her a lot, she does need the extra fat and stuff. I have heard other horses that have done well on Alcor, but I don't have any personal experience on that. So I can only tell you what has worked for me.
Some of the research that I've read and where this is coming from, I think is some horses do better with a protein supplement, and what they're recommending is instead of using just a generic protein feed or a high protein feed because it comes with all of the high potassium and molasses and things like that, they're usually recommending to supplement with amino acids instead. So that's probably where your horse is doing better. So you're going to supplement with a protein instead of a starch, whereas in normal management, of these horses, you're going to supplement with the fat. But if you have an overconditioned horse, you really need to bump up that exercise to get them back down to a normal body condition score. And then you can kind of manage them probably a little bit less expensively, because I imagine using amino acid supplementation can be a little more expensive than a fat supplementation regime. But Stacy says, yes, he's also on a whey protein isolate. So yeah, so exactly. She's just trying to transfer the fat supplement, the calories and the energy that she's getting from fat over to a protein.
Yeah, and some of the other PSSM2 genotypes, those horses require high protein diets. And so they do really well when you bump up their protein. PSSM1 horses tend to not need as much protein and actually don't do as well when you give them super high protein diets. And so that is something to keep in mind. She gets the 1 pound of Enrich twice a day with her beet pulp, and that was balanced, like I said, with the Nutrina nutritionalist, who was super duper smart, way smarter than me, and knew her stuff. And so we went through everything that my mare was getting, and she made a very extensive diet list. And then she also had on that diet list where I could add extra calories if I needed them to get her to go up. I used to give her more corn oil per feeding. I've actually cut back because I haven't been riding her quite as heavy. And once she got to a good weight, she didn't need to continue to gain weight. So now she's on more of a maintenance diet than like an actual weight gain diet. So other things to think about. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Some horses are sensitive to certain feed products. So I know anecdotally in these forums, there are some horses that are extremely sensitive to soy products. And so if soy is in your protein supplements, sometimes these horses don't respond well to that. These horses do need high levels of magnesium, somewhere usually between 5 to 10,000 per day. So you can split that into 2 feedings. Some need more than that, some need less than that, but that's kind of a general rule, as these horses need a lot of magnesium to keep their muscles going. And so I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Yep, it's gone. Sorry. It'll come back to me. Oh, vitamin E, that's what I want to talk about. So vitamin E is really important, like we talked about earlier. The thing with vitamin E that we have to keep in mind is that high levels of vitamin E can cause a horse to be crazy. I tried to increase my mare's vitamin E, and she went from a quiet pleasure horse to a horse who was like spooking at everything. She was just like nuts, and it was horrible. So keep in mind that if you're feeding like Enrich has vitamin E in it, and it has decent levels of vitamin E in it, it has the minimum requirements in there. And so for me, I do not need to cannot supplement extra vitamin E for her because she goes bananas. Some horses do need more vitamin E, but if you have increased the vitamin E supplement and your horse is way more high strung than they used to be, keep in mind that it could be the vitamin E that's causing that.
Great. I think that's all we have for covering how to manage your horse with PSSM. Liz, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, that's it.
Okay. Like Liz said, this is going to be my soapbox for the second. AQHA has a really cheap 6-panel test going around. Make sure if you're breeding or have intentions to breed your mare, or if you're standing a stallion, please do the industry a favor and do the test, right? If you're breeding a horse, $100 is a drop in the bucket. Just to kind of be educated. And I think of it in the long term, it's just going to increase the value of the animal that you're marketing anyhow, because we need to be upfront about what kind of potential issues we're putting out in the industry as responsible breeders. Again, Dr. Liz and I, neither of us profess to be experts on PSSM. I plan on posting some really great resources that the two experts in the field kind of already have published and made available. The major problem that I saw with some of their resources that were available to the general public is there wasn't a whole lot of firsthand experience involved in it. And that's why I wanted Dr. Liz to come on and kind of explain to you guys what she does to manage her personal mare, and kind of explain to the fact that, yeah, she's successful. She's had a really good run with this mare. She's won some money. She's done a lot of really great training on this horse, and it still has quite a long life ahead of her. And as long as she can stay managed, good things will keep coming to this little mare. So there is life after PSSM, and you can manage your mare, or manage your horses if they have this issue. You just got to be really mindful and very careful and very detail oriented to keep them in a position where they can stay healthy. If you guys have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Liz. Thank you for everyone watching and participating with us today and making these little web series successful. We'll see you this Friday with Dr. Oberhaus and hopefully Dr. Andrews from the LSU Vet School to talk about Cushing's and PPID in horses. We'll see you next time.